there are albums, and then there are objects. And this is one of those records where the music is almost not the point. Because yes, this is Pink Floyd's The Dark Side of the Moon, one of the most famous albums ever made. Millions of copies sold. 15 years on the charts. Repressed, reissued, remastered, repackaged. Again and again and again. But this copy is different. Not because of a different track list, not because of an alternate mix, not because Roger Waters suddenly reduxed it. That's a story for another time. No, this one is different because of a triangle, a solid blue triangle. Let's dive deep into it. It doesn't matter which version you buy, it's the same music, right? No, it really isn't. Hey, Pink Floyd collectors, pay attention. Because this triangle, this tiny detail, can be the difference between a very common classic rock record and one of the most desirable pressings of the 1970s. To understand why this pressing matters, you have to forget the music for a moment and start looking at the physical clues. So today, we're not going to talk about the songs, we're going to talk about the object, the label, the sleeve, the matrix numbers,
Nerd alert!
the inserts, the myths.
I'm telling you, Dark Side of the Moon totally syncs up with The Wizard of Oz.
Really?
The price, and the question every record collector secretly loves and fears. Would I buy this if I found it in the wild? Look what I have found. Pink Floyd, The Dark Side of the Moon, first UK pressing. Okay, so a blue triangle. Not exactly something you'd expect to spend hundreds of dollars on. But this is where it gets interesting, because this isn't just a design, it's a snapshot in time. The very first UK pressings of The Dark Side of the Moon came with a solid blue triangle on the label, completely filled in. But it didn't stay that way. Pretty quickly, it was changed to an outline version. Same triangle, just the border. And from that moment on, the solid version was history. So why change something like that? Why go from a fully printed blue triangle to just an outline? The honest answer is no one knows for sure. Well, except Roger Waters. But then again, he knows everything. There is, however, one explanation that most collectors agree on. And it's actually pretty simple. Printing, that solid blue triangle, is a large block of ink. And in mass production, especially in the 70s, that's harder to keep consistent. You get variation in color, saturation, small imperfections. An outline is much easier, less ink, cleaner lines, more consistent results. And that makes a lot more sense for large production runs, which means that solid triangle was most likely only used in the very first batch, before someone at the pressing plant thought, we can do this more efficiently. And that exact moment, that short transition, is what makes this version so interesting. Not because it was meant to be rare, but because it was replaced before it ever became the standard. So when you see that triangle, you instantly know this isn't just any dark side of the moon. This is how it started. But the triangle alone isn't enough, because if you really want to know what you're holding, you have to look beyond the label. Because labels can lie. They can be swapped, replaced, faked, or simply not original to the record. So if you really want to know what you've got, you have to look at something almost no one notices. Right here, the so-called dead wax. That small strip of vinyl between the music and the label. Matrix numbers.
Nerd alert!
In that space, you'll find small engraved codes. And those codes tell you when this record was pressed. And sometimes even which lacquer cut it came from. For a first UK pressing of The Dark Side of the Moon, you're usually looking for something like a 2 and B2. That means very early cuts on both sides. So, close to the source, but be careful. This isn't an exact science. You might also find combinations like A2/B3, which are still considered early pressings. And here's the key. You can't fake this. It's literally stamped into the vinyl. So where the label might mislead you, this tells you the truth. Think of it this way. The label is what you see, but the matrix is what you have. But even then, you're not there yet, because a true first pressing of this album never came alone. This was designed as a complete package. Not just music, but image, design, experience. The sleeve itself is already iconic. That prism on the outside, and inside, that continuous heartbeat line. Even here you can tell. This isn't a standard release, but it gets really interesting when you look inside. Originally, it came with 2 large posters, one featuring the band and one with the famous pyramids, echoing the shape of the prism. And then there are 2 postcards, or stickers, depending on how you look at them, which you probably never used. And this is where it gets interesting, because the moment one of these pieces is missing, the value drops. No posters, less valuable. No stickers, less valuable. Just the record? Then you're only holding part of the story. For collectors, it's not just about what you hear. It's about what you hold and how complete that story is. This is the release. This is just a fragment. This is the full experience. This album was never just meant to be played. It was meant to be unfolded. But even if you have everything, the right triangle, the right matrix, all the inserts complete, there's still one question left. Does this version actually sound better? Because in the end, you're still buying a record, not just an object. A lot of people assume a first pressing automatically means the best sound, but it's not that simple. Yes, early pressings often sit closer to the original mastering. Fewer generations of copies, less compression, often a slightly warmer sound. But it's not a guarantee, because you might be holding a first pressing that's been played for 50 years with a worn-out needle. And that can sound worse than a $30 reissue. In fact, if you're purely focused on the sound quality, modern audiophile reissues often come out on top. Heavier vinyl, better pressing quality, sometimes even new, high-quality remasters. So, if you're looking for the best-sounding version, this first UK pressing isn't necessarily the answer. And that brings you to the real question. Are you buying this album for the sound or for a piece of music history? Because this isn't just a way to hear the album. This is a way to hold a moment, a physical object that reflects or captures how it all began. So, now you know what to look for. You know why this version matters. But there's still one question left. What is it worth to you for an album that contains the exact same music? For an album, that might sound the same, but feels completely different from a $20 copy. Imagine this. You walk into a record store, you flip through a crate, and you find this. Do you take it home, or does it all come down to the price? Because money. It's a gas. Let me know in the poll, would you actually spend serious money on this? And in the comments, are you team sound or team history? Is it about what you hear or what it represents? Us or them? And if your head explodes with dark forebodings too, I'll see you on the dark side of the moon.
There is no dark side in the moon, really. Matter of fact, it's all dark.
And that was Pink Floyd. That was The Dark Side of the Moon. You can listen to this album and all the music from this series via the Spotify playlist. Check the socials for updates, because I will follow you if you follow me. Stick around in the lunar landscape for a bit longer, because you can go on safari with my episode on Moon Safari by Air. There's literally light on the dark side there. That LP is a glow-in-the-dark pressing. Click the card and watch the episode here. Thanks for watching. See you next time. And in the meantime, drop the needle, press play, and remember, we're only in it for the music.